my name is Elisha, and in this video I'll be sharing with you how I made this DIY off-shoulder crop top from scratch. This piece is great to accentuate your waistline and to cover up any arm fats and underboob fats. I'll list all the measurements you need in the description box below, so do remember to check it out. To start things off, I measured my shoulder circumference for the ruffle piece. Holding one end of the measuring tape, I let go of the other side and measured how short I want the ruffles to be. At the same time, I measured how long I wanted the crop top to be. And from that point, I wrapped the measuring tape across my body to measure my waist circumference. To create the body piece, I first stacked the fabric one over another with the wrong sides facing outwards. Here, I'm using an O-top as a guide to trace the sides and armhole. I made sure to mark the midpoint of both armholes to create the top hem and then use it as a guide to create a parallel bottom hem. Using the measurements taken for the length of the body piece, I'm adding an extra 5 cm for chest allowance and for a more voluminous puffy look. Thereafter, I left the top and bottom hem with a seam allowance of 3 cm and a seam allowance of 2 cm on the sides. Lastly, on the good side of both pieces, I'm marking the top hem's midpoint. To create the ruffle piece, I overlapped 2 layers of fabric with the wrong side facing outwards. For its length, I doubled up the measurements of my shoulder circumference for a more ruffled look. Then, I started by marking 3 cm of seam allowance for the top hem and used its midpoint length as a guide to create the bottom hem. As I wanted this crop top to have a little more depth, I added an extra 3 cm to its midpoint width while keeping the sides at its original measured length. And that gave me somewhat a V-shaped bottom hem. Lastly, I made sure to also leave 2 cm of seam allowance. As these pieces are long and narrow, I'm pinning the 2 layers together to prevent the fabric from moving too much when cutting. When that's done, I mark the midpoints of the top hem on the good side of both pieces. For the waist elastic band, I reduced 5 cm from the measured waist circumference and added 1 cm of seam allowance. For the shoulder elastic band, I reduced 20 cm from the measured shoulder circumference and added 1 cm of seam allowance. So in total, I had prepared 2 elastic bands, 2 ruffle pieces, and 2 body pieces. To start sewing, I placed both the body pieces together with the wrong sides facing outwards before pinning them in place. Then I used a strut stitch to sew them down before using an overcasting stitch to sew the side hems to prevent any fraying. Next, I fold down twice to hem the armholes. When that's done, it should look something like that. For the bottom hem, I folded it up twice, pinned it in place, and before sewing, I used some clips as an indicator to leave a small opening to insert the elastic band later. Do take note that here I'm trying to actually sew as close to the edge as possible so that there will be enough space to slot the elastic band in. Here, I'm using the safety pin method to insert the elastic band. Thereafter, I sew the elastic together by hand, slot the elastic back in, and closed up the small opening. Moving on to the outer piece with the wrong sides facing outwards, I pinned and sewed the side hems together to form a long donut piece. Then, I folded up the bottom hem up twice, secure it with pins, and sew it down to hide the cutting. When that's done, it should look something like that. Now, to join both pieces together, I flip them right side facing outwards, align the midpoint markings together, pin them in place before sewing it down. When that's done, I overcast the top hem and folded it down once to create the pocket for the elastic band. And the reason why I did this differently from the bottom hem of the body piece was simply because I realized that this required less effort than having to pin and fold the hem twice before sewing. Here, I'm making sure to leave a small opening again to insert the elastic band later. Similarly, I used the same safety pin method, joined them together, sewed up the small opening, and all done! Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do remember to subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up.